Okay, so pausing didn't work, so we're going to have part one, part two. I think we left off at Cold War. You should be able to talk about the proxy wars and at least one of them in specific detail. Be able to identify which proxy wars were a success for containment and which would be considered failures. Domestic 1960s lecture, you should be able to identify, obviously going back to New Deal, you should be able to identify or define what is a welfare state, what does it mean to be a welfare state as a nation, and identify what would be some welfare state programs and which ones come from the New Deal and then which ones come from Great Society. Campus protests, I believe I asked you on the quiz about Kent State, but you should also be able to identify what happens at Berkeley. And then I think we also talked about Columbia. Organizations in the 1960s, you should be able to talk about SDS, SNCC, SCLC. Oh, of course, NAACP as well, even though it wasn't created during the classical phase, it had been around for some time. Should be able to identify or define rather civil disobedience, which I think I'd asked you on the quiz as well. And then also from the classical phase, we talked about the two major pieces of legislation to come out of the classical phase, the two major victories for the nonviolent movement, Civil Rights Act of 64, Voting Rights Act of 65. Obviously, you should be able to define or identify those and then connect them to major events on the ground, so to speak. In other words, what were the things that happened that kind of pushed Congress to pass that legislation in both cases? Then you should be able to talk about Black Power, to be able to define Black Power and talk about how is the Black Power movement that takes shape in the late 60s, how is that different from the nonviolent movement from the classical phase? And then conservative counter-revolution, you should be able to identify that core set of issues that I talked about that you see being put together by the likes of Strom Thurmond and Barry Goldwater and eventually Wallace and Reagan. What were those issues that are at the heart eventually of the conservative counter-revolution? And I'm also going to ask you about white flight, which you should be able to identify, define. And that's it. We nixed the post-Cold War lectures, so that's it. Obviously, let me know if you have any questions. You should be obviously fully prepared before you open up the exam. You should have plenty of time. But yeah, let me know if you got questions between now and then. I think it posts tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, and will be open for the better part of a week. So good luck, Godspeed, happy holidays. I would say I enjoyed the semester. That's true to an extent, but I think all of us kind of just tried to make it through this one too. Hopefully next semester will be not so bad. We'll see. All right, see y'all.